For 9 years I called them my family. Not Caroline's children. Not my stepchildren. Mine. Maybe that was the first mistake. When I married Caroline, Brooke was 15 and Austin was 13. Their biological father, Trevor, still existed somewhere on the edges of their lives, drifting in for birthdays, sending the occasional message, making promises that usually disappeared before they became real. I was the man who stayed. The house outside Charlotte had been mine before Caroline ever walked through the front door, but after we married, I stopped thinking of it that way. It became our home. Their home. I paid the mortgage, the utilities, the groceries. Later came car insurance, phone bills, repairs, deposits, emergencies. Always emergencies. When Brooke moved into her first apartment, she couldn't quite afford the rent. I covered the difference. When Austin started working but somehow never had enough money left at the end of the month, I sent him some. Then some more. When his insurance went up, I kept him on my policy. When Brooke overdrafted her account, I transferred money before the fee could hit. I told myself this was what family did. You didn't keep score. You didn't hand someone an invoice for loving them. But something changed as they got older. Help stopped being something they appreciated. It became something they expected. Brooke would text me 3 words. Rent due tomorrow. No hello. No thank you. Austin would call because his card had been declined and sound irritated that I wanted to know what he'd spent his paycheck on. Whenever I asked about work, debts, savings, anything remotely connected to the money I was constantly providing, their faces tightened. Why do you care? Because I was paying. That seemed like a reasonable answer. Apparently it wasn't. Caroline saw the tension and did what she always did. She stayed out of it. Then came dinner. Brooke and Austin were both at the house. Caroline had made pasta. I remember that stupid detail because sometimes the moment your life changes doesn't arrive with thunder. Sometimes it arrives beside a bowl of grated Parmesan. I asked Brooke whether she talked to her landlord about renewing the lease. She put down her fork. Why? Because I'm paying most of the rent. I thought maybe we should talk about what happens next. Her expression changed. Cold. Annoyed. Like I was interfering in something that belonged entirely to her. Stay out of our lives. The room went silent. I looked at her. Then Austin leaned back in his chair. Seriously. Just stay away from us. I turned toward Caroline. 9 years of marriage. 9 years of helping raise her children. 9 years of checks, transfers, repairs, rescues. All she had to say was one sentence. Don't speak to him like that. She said nothing. That silence finished what Brooke had started. I didn't shout. I didn't remind them about every dollar I'd spent. I nodded. Finished dinner. Went to bed. The next morning, I gave them exactly what they wanted. I canceled Brooke's rent transfer. Removed Austin from my auto insurance. Closed the additional cards linked to my account. Cancelled every recurring payment that existed only because I had agreed to carry part of their adult lives. Caroline found me at the kitchen counter. What are you doing? They asked me to stay out of their lives. She stared at me. You know they didn't mean financially. I almost laughed. Instead, I looked at her and said, financing their lives is still being involved. 3 days later, Brooke's landlord called her. Austin discovered his insurance was gone. That evening they both came to the house furious. Not sorry. Furious. Brooke demanded that I restore the rent payment. Austin said I was being petty. You knew what we meant. Brooke snapped. Yes, I told her. You wanted independence from me without losing access to my bank account. She flushed. Austin started shouting. Then Brooke said something that showed me they still didn't understand. This is still Mom's house. We can come here whenever we want. I looked around the living room. The walls I'd painted. The floors I'd replaced. The mortgage I'd paid long before I met Caroline. Something inside me became very quiet. The next day I packed the belongings Brooke and Austin had left behind. Boxes. Old clothes. Sports equipment. Everything neat. Everything dry beneath the covered porch. Then I called a locksmith. That evening they arrived. Their keys didn't work. Brooke rattled hers again. Austin stared through the window. I stepped outside. They saw the boxes. Then they saw me. "You told me to stay out of your lives," I said. "I heard you." Neither spoke. "Now you stay out of mine." For once, there was no argument strong enough to make the lock turn. The following weeks taught them lessons my money had protected them from. Brooke took extra shifts. Austin bought his own insurance, and nearly choked when he saw the premium. Bills became real when my name disappeared from them. Caroline was furious with me at first. She said I'd gone too far. I told her she'd spent years teaching her children that my generosity required nothing from them. Not gratitude. Not responsibility. Not even basic respect. Eventually she stopped arguing. Then, quietly, she admitted I was right about one thing. She should have spoken at that dinner. Weeks passed. The messages changed. No more demands. No more accusations. Brooke apologized first. Austin followed. Months later, they came back for dinner. No requests for money. No questions about insurance. No expectation of keys. They admitted they'd become used to me solving problems before those problems could hurt. I accepted the apologies. But I didn't reopen the accounts. I didn't restore the rent payments. I didn't put Austin back on my policy. For 9 years, I had tried to prove I belonged in their family by sacrificing for them. I don't do that anymore. If they want me in their lives now, they have to prove something too. Because love can be freely given. Money can be freely given. Time can be freely given. But when people begin treating sacrifice like an obligation, generosity stops being love. It becomes permission to use you. So tell me, was I wrong to finally let them live without me? Or should I have kept paying for the privilege of being told I wasn't family? For nearly 10 years, I believed that house contained my family. Not Megan's family. Not another man's son living under my roof. Mine. When I married Megan, Cole was 11. His biological father existed mostly as a name attached to excuses. He missed practices, birthdays, school meetings. I never tried to replace him. I simply did what needed doing. I drove Cole to practice before work. I repaired his bike, then helped buy his first car. I paid groceries, utilities, repairs, insurance. When the furnace died in January, I replaced it. When Cole needed money, somehow my wallet was always close enough. I thought consistency would eventually become belonging. Years passed. Cole became a man, got a full-time job, and stayed in the house. My house. I had bought it years before meeting Megan. But I never used that fact against either of them. Home was supposed to mean something larger than paperwork. Cole contributed almost nothing. At first I excused it. He was getting started. Then 1 year became 2. His paycheck became better, but his contribution remained 0. Groceries vanished. Lights stayed on. Water ran. The internet bill climbed. I paid. One evening I finally asked him to start helping. Nothing dramatic. Groceries and part of the utilities. He was an adult earning money. I thought it was reasonable. Cole stared at me across the dinner table and smirked. "This isn't your home. You just live here." I remember looking at Megan. That hurt more than his words. I waited for her to correct him. One sentence would have been enough. She lowered her eyes. Silence. I nodded. All right. Cole probably thought he'd won. I finished eating, washed my plate, and went upstairs. I barely slept. I kept hearing those words. You just live here. By morning, something inside me had gone cold. If I was merely a man living in their home, then I had been terribly confused about my responsibilities. So I corrected them. I removed my card from the automatic payments for everything except my portion of necessary household expenses. I stopped buying groceries for 3 adults. Cole's car insurance came off my account. So did the subscriptions he'd used for years without asking what they cost. I transferred Megan my share. Not $1 more. 3 days later, the refrigerator looked different. A week later, envelopes began appearing on the counter. Cole noticed immediately. "Why isn't my insurance paid?" "Because you're an adult. You've always paid it." "I know." His face tightened. "So this is punishment?" "No. I'm just living here." He understood the sentence when it came back at him. Megan confronted me that night. She said I was taking one stupid comment too far. I told her the comment wasn't the real wound. Her silence was. "He was angry," she said. "And you were quiet." She had no answer. But I wasn't finished. Because there was one detail Cole apparently didn't understand. The house he had declared wasn't mine had belonged to me before I ever knew his mother. My name was on the deed. Mine alone. I met with a professional and learned the lawful process required to end an adult household member's residency. I didn't threaten Cole. I didn't throw his belongings onto the lawn. I did everything properly. Then one evening I placed the paperwork in front of him. He read the first page twice. The color drained from his face. "You're kicking me out? You said this isn't my home?" I was mad. "You were comfortable enough to insult me while I paid for your comfort." Megan began crying. Cole looked at her, expecting rescue. For years, that look had worked. This time I spoke first. "You're employed. You're an adult. You want a home where I have no place? Build one." He called his biological father that night. I heard enough of the conversation to understand the answer. No spare room. No money. No rescue. Reality arrived without ceremony. Cole found a small apartment. Then came rent. Deposit. Electricity. Internet. Groceries. Gas. Insurance. The invisible machinery of adult life began sending him invoices. Within weeks, his arrogance disappeared. He didn't come crawling back. I respected him more for that. He worked. Budgeted. Learned. Months later, he called and asked if I could explain part of his lease. I helped him. I wasn't trying to destroy him. I was refusing to carry a man who despised the shoulders beneath him. Eventually, he returned for dinner. Afterward, while Megan cleared the table, Cole stayed in the kitchen. "What I said was cruel," he told me. "And stupid. I didn't know what you were doing for us." I looked at him for a long time. "You didn't need to know every dollar. You only needed to know I deserved respect." He nodded. I accepted his apology. But I never restored the old arrangement. Some boundaries should remain after forgiveness. I learned that night that a man can spend years paying for a home and still be treated like a guest inside it. And Megan learned something too. Silence is not neutrality when someone you love is being humiliated. Sometimes silence chooses a side. Sometimes it sends a bill later. Mine finally came due. So tell me, was I wrong to make Cole leave and learn what adulthood cost, or would staying silent have taught him that disrespect was free? I thought Cole moving out would be the end of it. I was wrong. Distance did not erase what happened at that table. It only removed the noise that had hidden the damage for years. After he left, the house became painfully quiet. No shoes by the door. No television running upstairs. No empty containers shoved back into the refrigerator. Megan wandered through the rooms as if someone had died. Maybe in her mind, something had. She blamed me without saying it directly. Her questions carried the accusation. "Did it really have to go this far? Couldn't you have given him another chance?" I heard them all. And every time, I remembered the moment Cole told me I was only a guest in the house I had bought, and the woman I married stared at her plate. "He is your son," I finally told her one night. "I understand why you want to protect him. But who was protecting me?" Megan looked away. That movement had become familiar. For years, looking away had been easier than confronting him. Easier than admitting that I was expected to carry responsibility without receiving authority, gratitude, or even the right to defend my place in my own home. Cole struggled more than Megan told me at first. His apartment was smaller than he expected. The deposit wiped out most of his savings. His insurance premium shocked him. He discovered that groceries did not magically appear and electricity was not something houses produced for free. Then his car needed repairs. In the old days, he would have dropped the keys on the kitchen counter and said, "Something's wrong with it." I would have handled everything. This time, he called me. "The mechanic says it's the alternator." I waited. "Okay." Another silence. "It's expensive." There it was. The old invitation. The opening where I was supposed to reach for my wallet. I didn't. "Then you'll need to budget for it." His breathing changed. "That's it? What else were you expecting?" He didn't answer. I could almost hear the resentment rebuilding itself. Then he said, "Never mind," and hung up. Megan found out and came after me immediately. "You could have helped him." "I did." "How?" "I told him what he needed to do." She stared at me as though I had become cruel. Maybe that was easier than admitting I had simply stopped being useful on command. 2 weeks later, Cole called again. This time there was no complaint in his voice. He wanted to know whether a repair estimate sounded reasonable. I asked him to read it to me. We went through every line. I told him what looked necessary and what could wait. He thanked me. He did not ask for money. That small difference mattered more than he knew. Months passed. Something changed between us. Without my money sitting between every conversation, we finally had to decide whether there was anything else there. Sometimes he called about his car. Sometimes work. Once he asked how I had saved enough to buy the house. I almost laughed. 10 years under my roof, and he had never asked me that. So I told him. I told him about overtime, missed vacations, cheap meals, years of putting money aside while everyone around me seemed to spend theirs. "I thought you just had money," he said. That sentence explained almost everything. He had seen the result, never the sacrifice. He saw a refrigerator full of food, not the hours that paid for it. He saw insurance coverage, not the monthly deduction. He saw a house, not the years it took me to own it. And because he never saw the cost, he assumed there wasn't one. Megan began seeing it too. One evening she sat beside me and said something I had waited months to hear. "I failed you that night." I said nothing. When Cole said that, I should have stopped him. "I was afraid if I defended you, he'd think I was choosing you over him." "So you chose him over me?" She flinched. "Yes." It was the first honest answer she had given me. I didn't need tears. I didn't need excuses. I needed her to understand that silence had made me alone in a marriage where I had spent years carrying everyone else. Cole came for dinner again near the end of summer. He brought groceries. That almost made me smile. Afterward, he helped clean the kitchen without being asked. Then he stood by the counter, rubbing his palms together like he was trying to find courage. I need to say something. I waited. When I said this wasn't your home, I knew it would hurt you. That confession landed harder than an excuse would have. Why? Because I wanted to win. He swallowed. I knew you'd done more for me than Dad ever did. I think that made me angry. It was easier to act like you didn't matter than admit you did. For years I had imagined an apology. None of the versions in my head sounded like that. I nodded slowly. I can forgive what you said, but I won't forget what it taught me. I know. And I believed him. Cole never moved back. I never paid his bills again. Strangely, our relationship became better once he stopped needing my money. He began visiting because he wanted to see us, not because something was due. I learned something too. Providing can look like love, but endless providing can hide the truth. If people only value the hand while it is open, close it and see whether they still value the man attached to it. Cole eventually did. Megan finally did. But it took losing my money, my patience, and my silence for them to see me clearly. So was I too harsh for forcing that lesson on them, or had I simply waited far too long to teach it? I used to believe forgiveness meant restoring what existed before the wound. I know better now. Some things can be forgiven only after they are permanently changed. Cole's apology mattered to me, but it did not return us to the years when I paid his bills, solved his problems, and pretended not to notice how little respect came back across the table. That version of our family was finished. Maybe it needed to die. By autumn, Cole had been living alone for several months. He was still struggling, but the complaints had disappeared. He worked overtime when rent was due. He learned which grocery store was cheaper. He stopped replacing things merely because something newer existed. Once, while we were having coffee, he showed me a spreadsheet on his phone. Every expense was listed. Rent, electricity, insurance, gas, food, even laundry. I understand now, he said. Understand what? Why you were always tired. I looked at him. For years I had come home exhausted and found him stretched across my couch, eating food I bought while complaining that I asked too many questions. He had seen my exhaustion as part of the scenery. Now he understood its price. I thought adults just handled this stuff, he continued. I never thought about where the money came from. Someone always pays, I said. Even when you don't see them paying. He nodded. There was no dramatic apology that afternoon. I preferred it that way. Real change rarely announces itself. It appears in small things. Cole started bringing something when he came for dinner. He offered to help when something needed repairing. When Megan mentioned that the gutters needed cleaning, he showed up Saturday morning with gloves and a ladder before I could do it myself. I stood in the driveway watching him climb. A year earlier, I would have asked 3 times before getting a shrug. Now I hadn't asked once. Megan noticed too. He's different, she whispered. He had to become different, I answered. But Megan and I still had our own damage to repair. Cole had spoken the words that night, but her silence had given them permission. I could forgive a young man for arrogance more easily than I could forget my wife's decision to leave me standing alone. One evening, I finally told her that. I need to know why you said nothing. She sat across from me in the living room, hands folded tightly. I was scared. Of Cole? Of losing him. Her answer was quiet. After the divorce, I spent years worrying he'd blame me for everything. Whenever there was conflict between you two, I tried not to take sides. I shook my head. There was no neutral side that night. I know that now. You watched your adult son tell me I didn't belong in my own home. She lowered her eyes. Yes. And you let me go upstairs believing my wife agreed with him. Tears gathered, but I wasn't interested in tears. I had lived too long on gestures instead of truth. I didn't agree, she whispered. Then you should have spoken. That was the whole thing. Love hidden behind silence does very little for the person being wounded. Megan reached across the table. I didn't take her hand immediately. I needed her to understand that marriage wasn't simply sharing a bedroom while one person absorbed every blow to keep everyone else comfortable. If something like that happens again, I told her, I won't fight for my place here. I'll leave. She looked frightened. Good. Not because I wanted to frighten her, but because for the first time she understood that my presence was not guaranteed. Neither was my patience. Neither was my marriage. It won't happen again, she said. I eventually took her hand. That wasn't absolution. It was a beginning. Winter came. Cole spent Christmas with us. He arrived carrying gifts he had bought with his own money. Nothing expensive. A book for me. A scarf for Megan. He looked almost embarrassed when he handed me the package. It's not much. I turned the book over in my hands. You bought it yourself? Yeah. Then it's enough. During dinner, nobody mentioned the eviction. Nobody mentioned his father. Nobody mentioned the night everything broke. We didn't need to. The empty chair between memory and forgiveness was still there. After dinner, Cole helped me carry dishes into the kitchen. Before leaving, he stopped at the front door. "I used to think you threw me out because you hated me. I never hated you." "I know." He looked around the hallway. "You threw me out because I needed to leave." I considered correcting him. I hadn't wanted to teach some grand lesson. At the time, I simply couldn't tolerate another day of being disrespected beneath my own roof. But maybe consequences teach lessons even when nobody plans them. "You needed to understand that being family doesn't mean someone owes you everything," I said. Cole nodded. Then he hugged me. It was awkward. Brief. Real. After he left, I stood at the window watching his car disappear. Megan came beside me. "Do you regret it?" she asked. I knew exactly what she meant. The canceled payments. The paperwork. The day Cole carried his belongings out of my house. I regret that it became necessary. That was the truth. I never wanted gratitude purchased through suffering. I wanted respect before consequences made respect useful. But sometimes people don't recognize the foundation beneath them until it is removed. Cole had called me a guest. Megan had treated me like one by remaining silent. So I stopped behaving like the man responsible for keeping everyone comfortable. And only then did they understand what my presence had meant. Maybe that makes me unforgiving. Maybe it makes me selfish. But I know this much now: love that requires one person to swallow endless disrespect isn't love. It's surrender. And I had surrendered enough. So tell me, if your family only recognized your value after you stopped carrying them, would you forgive them and rebuild? Or would you wonder forever whether they finally loved you or simply learned what losing you cost?